Hi folks, this is Karim Raouf from IT Visualizer channel. We will continue our lab, the Marvel Studio lab. This is the video number 6. We have been discussing in the previous video the following. We have been creating a second virtual machine, and we will name it DC Marvel 02, and this virtual machine will act as an additional domain controller and an additional DNS and an additional Wins server. I've discussed in the previous video what is DNS, what is Wins, okay, and we have discussed what is the concept of the file server, and we will discuss in this video the DHCP and what is the concept and what is the benefit of using a DHCP, and we will create a DHCP main DHCP and the failover partner. We will discuss also what is the benefit of having a DHCP failover partner. We have discussed in the previous video what is a WSUS and what is the benefits of using a WSUS, and in this virtual machine we have created two network cards. And why we have two network cards? To make teaming or network teaming between them for network load balance and for redundancy, and for a lot of benefits also we have discussed in the beginning of the lab. Then we install Windows Server 2019 on this virtual machine, and there was a problem when you have inserted the Windows Server 2019 DVD. It was not booting, or the virtual machine was not booting from this ISO image, and it was solved by changing the virtual machine firmware from BIOS from UFE BIOS to from UFE system to BIOS firmware system. And we have discussed what is the BIOS and what is UFI and what is CMOS and what is the difference between the BIOS and the CMOS. Please refer to my previous video for more details. And then after installing the Windows, we need to set a password for the default Windows account, which is created by default for you when you install Windows. This is a default username called administrator. We need to give it a password and then change this username from administrator to any other name, and then disable this username completely and create another user that have the same benefits or permissions of this user. This administrator account, it has full control over the Windows operating system. So we need to rename it and give it a password and disable it, and then create a user that have the same benefits of this user. Why we do this? Because most of the hackers know that there is a user called administrator in the Windows, and most of us do not put a password on it, and most of them know the username itself. So we will make it more difficult by changing the username and to give it a strong password. And then we enable remote desktop option on this server to enable us to remotely connect to this server, and it will be for a certain Active Directory group. It is not opened completely, or it is not enabled for every user. And then we change the Windows name, or the computer Windows name, to DC Marvel 02, and then we install VMware tools on this virtual machine. We have said before that installing VMware tools is very critical to enable or to make more integration between your host and your guest, or from your laptop to your virtual machine. This VMware tools make it more reliable and more easy to communicate between your host and your guest. So this is very critical. It installs certain drivers and certain features to enable or to enhance the communication between your host and your guest. And then we have make network teaming between the two network cards on this server. And then we have a problem when we were making this network team. It was not completed because there is because the load balance option in the network teaming was set to dynamic, and to solve this problem we need to change it from dynamic to address hash. This solved the problem and the network teaming was done. But actually this is only in the virtual environment. In a physical environment, the dynamic option in the network teaming will work, okay? And then we set a static IP address for the server, because this server should be a domain controller and other roles, and this server should have a fixed static IP address, okay? And then we have installed the Active Directory domain services, and then after that we promoted the server to be a domain controller. And then we created a custom console. We have said what is the benefit of creating custom console. A custom console, it is like one window. From it you can configure a lot of things. So from this window you can configure the Active Directory users and computers, and configure the DNS, and configure the group policies, and a lot of things in one location and in one window. Okay, this is very useful for IT stuff. It is very good. And then after that we need to add, because this second virtual machine will be a secondary DNS and a secondary WINS, we need to add the secondary DNS and the secondary WINS to the network connection of both DC Marvel 01 and DC Marvel 02. So DC Marvel 01 has a primary DNS. We need to tell him that you have a secondary DNS and a secondary WINS, and we need also to inform the secondary domain controller that you have a primary DNS and alternative DNS, and you have a primary WINS and the secondary WINS. All of this was done in the previous video. In this video we will discuss the installation of the DHCP and the installation of the file server role and installation of the WSUS, and to configure how to configure the three of them. But before that we need to have a small discussion about what is a DHCP and why we use it and what is the benefit of using it. Okay, so let's have this graph or this presentation. This is a video from a YouTube channel called PowerCert Videos. This contains a lot of videos that is very useful, discussing different concepts of IT, especially the Microsoft concepts. So I urge you all to go and download and see these videos. Here I have just installed or have downloaded the video and cut it to slides so we can discuss it. So what is DHCP? DHCP, it is called Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. Okay, first of all, how PCs communicate with each other in a network. Every computer or network should have an IP address. Okay, this IP address, it is like this one. So for example, let me show you all. This is, for example, an IP address, and this IP address should be given to the machine by two ways. The first way is to have a static IP address, which means that the user assign or type the IP address in the computer. So you have installed an operating system on this computer and it is on a network. Then you should go to the network connection setting and type the IP manually by yourself. So this is the first way for giving a computer an IP address. And I said before, IP address is very important so the PCs in a network can communicate with each other. Something like a telephone number, so you can't reach someone in his home unless he has a telephone number, so you can dial it and communicate with each other. So this is the first thing. This is the static IP, which means you need to put the IP address manually by yourself. This is the first way for assigning an IP address. Okay, and also you can assign a gateway and a subnet mask and a DNS. We all know what is the option of the DNS or what is the benefit of DNS. We have discussed it in previous videos. And the default gateway, this is the gateway that will get you to the internet. So this is the router IP address that will get you to the internet. Okay, and this is the subnet mask. So all of this is typed by the user. But in a large environment, this can be useful in for 2 or 3 PCs in a small network. But what if you have 100 or 200 PCs? You will go and statically or go and type every IP address in every network connection in every PC. This is a lot of work. So here comes to the play the DHCP. First of all, we need to know something. For example, here is 4 PCs. Okay, every one of them has a different IP address. Okay, 2 of them have the same IP address. So these 2, there will be something called an IP conflict. Okay, so what will happen if we have 2 PCs having the same IP address? First of all, these 2 PCs will not be able to communicate with each other. This is the first thing. And the other 2 PCs will not be able to communicate with both the PCs that have conflict. So this is the first thing that will happen if you have a conflict between IP addresses or 2 PCs having the same IP address. So let's continue here. The other thing for assigning IP addresses to machines is through something called dynamic host control protocol. This is called dynamic IP address assigning. So a PC will be assigned IP addresses automatically okay, from DHCP server. Okay, this will be assigned automatically, so you don't need to type it. Okay, so how this is done, I will show you all this here. First of all, the DHCP will give an IP address to the machine and will give it a subnet mask and the default gateway and the DNS. So all of these things are distributed by the DHCP. Okay, so it will give it an IP address, it will give it a subnet mask, it will give it the router gateway or the way to get to the internet, and the DNS server. Okay, this is very important because in our domain we need every PC to know the domain controller IP address, so this PC can join the domain. So before joining the domain, this PC should get an IP address, subnet mask, gateway, and the IP of the domain controller, so this PC can be able to join the domain. Okay, so this is it, how this is done. If you go to the network connection setting for this PC, which uses the DHCP for getting its IP address, you will see that the option of obtain an IP address automatically is checked, and obtain DNS server address automatically checked. So this is the automatic way. As for the static way, you need to choose the second option. Okay, so this is how we distribute IP addresses automatically. We will install the DHCP server, and this we will do it in this lab and do the different configuration, and after that, if we have any PC that is joining to the network, it will search automatically for the DHCP and find it and get an IP address. I will show you all this process, but anyway, so the PC, when it's powered on, it will communicate with the DHCP automatically, and it will get an IP address request. Okay, and then it will get the IP address. Okay, so this is simply the way how you can know that this PC got an IP address. You can go to the command prompt and type a certain command. It will give you some info. The first thing to know that you have a DHCP in your network when you see this option and yes, so this means that there is a DHCP and it is the one responsible for give it an IP address, which is in the second line, and this is subnet mask, and this is the default gateway, and this is the DNS. All of these are distributed from the DHCP, which is enabled in the first line. So here we have all of this. Okay, so now how this works in the DHCP, you have how much IP addresses should this DHCP assign to PCs. You give it a scope or a range of IP addresses that begins from a start IP address range and start IP address and an end IP address. So for example, here we have from 10.0.0.1 to 10.0.1.100. So here you have 99 IPs that can be distributed to the computers. So when you configure the DHCP, you need to tell him the scope or the number of IP addresses that it will distribute, and the default gateway it will distribute, and the DNS servers that it will distribute. This also will be done when we configure the DHCP, so don't be in a hurry. I will show you all this. So here, for example, we can see that, just a moment, here we can see that we have from 1 until 100. This is all of the ranges that this DHCP will distribute. So this is called scope. This will be the configured when we install the DHCP role. So here, this IP, so it's communicated with DHCP and it got an IP address. This IP address should be available for the PC for a certain time. For example, if this PC is opened for example 1 hour, this IP address will still with this PC for 1 hour, but after the 1 hour is finished, this IP address will not be available for the PC, and it needs to communicate after 1 hour with the DHCP again to get another IP address or the same IP address. This depends. So this is called lease. So why we use this kind of option in the DHCP? Because here, what is the lease? It is the amount of time IP address is assigned to a computer. The lease is to help make sure that the DHCP server does not run out of IP addresses. For example, if you have 99 IP addresses, okay, and all of them are distributed, okay, the PC number 100, if we try to join the domain and get an IP address, it will not get an IP address because all of the ranges are distributed. So the lease help us to control or to use our IP address pool. So for example, if this PC is turned off, okay, after 1 hour this IP will be available. So the PC number 100, if it's joining the domain, it can get this IP address because it is now available, because its lease time is ended. Okay, so this helps us to distribute a limited number of IP addresses, okay, through using the lease option. Okay, so let's see what will happen if we don't have this option. So here, this is the end line, and this we have the IP addresses. So here, for example, if we have 3 PCs, okay, this or the DHCP have only 3 IP addresses available, so it distributed the 3 IP addresses, and the lease is not working. So let's consider that the lease option is not working. So what will happen if this PC is out, or it is out for any reason? For example, it's corrupted or it's not working, and another PC try to take a DHCP or to take an IP address from the DHCP. If the lease is not working, this will not be able to take IP address because it is still attached to this PC. But if the lease is working, after a certain amount of time, the IP will be released, and the DHCP can give this PC the IP address. So let's here, for example, see here. So if the lease is working, the IP address will be released, or it will be expired, and then we can get this IP address, okay, without any problem. So this is one of the benefits of using the lease option. Okay, so we will have the DHCP, we will configure the scope, we will have the lease option, and then we have something called the DHCP reservation. So we can give a certain IP address to a certain computer every time, or to be or this PC will always take a certain IP address. So how we can do this? We can do this by something called address reservation. We give the IP address, or we assign, or we say what IP address we need it to be fixed or to be given every time to a certain PC, and this PC name and the MAC address of the network card. We have said before that the MAC address, it is a unique number for the network card installed to this PC, which is responsible for communicating or make this computer communicate with other PCs. So this network card has a certain number. So here this number is unique, and it cannot be duplicated, or it cannot be repeated in any device in the world. So we will use this unique number to assign or to mark the PC. So to have a certain IP address assigned to a certain PC, we put the IP address, we put the name of the PC, and then we put the MAC address. Through it we will mark, or we will be able to know the device name. Okay, so this is it. Here, for example, we will give it an IP address. This is the name, and this is the MAC address of the network card. This is very critical, because without the MAC address, the DHCP will not be able to know the PC, which PC is this, even though he has the name. Okay, it's not enough, he need to know the MAC address. Okay, this is called reservation, typically given to specific devices or computers, such as network printers, servers, or routers. Okay, we all of this for something like this one. And DHCP could be installed on a Windows operating system, could be installed on a Linux server, could be installed on a router. So for example, here we can have DHCP on a router, okay, which can have Linux system operating system. We can have DHCP on a Windows operating system. We can have it on a router which have Linux on it, or any other operating system, or we can have it on certain devices. So the router in your UDSL home router have a DHCP on it, okay, and the DHCP could be installed on a Windows operating system. So we have a lot of devices that can act as a DHCP. You can have it on a Windows server, you can have it on a router, you can have it on anything, okay, but this is the most important devices that have DHCP installed on it. Okay, so this is I urge you all to go to this channel and see the fantastic videos concerning this. So this is the DHCP. We will configure it in this video, and we will configure a file server, and we will have certain folders shared on this file server, and we will able some users to communicate and access this folders, and we will configure a WSUS. So without hesitation, let's go to the practical part of this video. So here we will begin configuring the DHCP. So this is our second domain controller. Here we will configure the DHCP. So here we will go and open or Control Alt Delete and type the username. This is the domain admin, and then we will open the server manager. Here I will just open the start menu and pin the server manager application to the taskbar. So you will right click here, we'll just open it, and then I will pin it to the taskbar, so I don't need every time to open the start menu and click on it. So here now we will close this server manager message, and then we will go to manage and tell him to add role and features, and then we will add a couple of server roles, the DHCP, the file server role, the WSUS role. Okay, as we can see here that there is certain errors here appearing with red, okay, in the server manager console. We can see these errors and rectify it if we need. Tell him next, and then next, and then next, and then we need to add the DHCP. So here we'll add DHCP, and then add features, and then we will add the Windows server update services, which is abbreviated as WSUS, and then we will add the file server resource manager, which will enable us to have this server acting as a file server, and we will use it to share different folders for different departments and add quotas to these folders and add file screening rules. I will discuss this when it comes, but bear with me. So here, for example, you need to go to the previous, and then we have added the WSUS and the DHCP. Here we open the file server or file and storage services, and then we add file server storage or file server resource manager. This will enable this server to act as a file server, and through this file server resource manager we will make quotas and file screening rules. Okay, so here is some options concerning the WSUS. Here you will ask me where we will save, or where is the location that the WSUS will save the Windows updates to it. We have said that the WSUS will communicate with the Microsoft website and download the different operating system updates and distribute it to your PCs in the domain. So we need to have a folder and tell the WSUS to save these updates to it. Okay, so we'll create a folder and we will name it WSUS, and we will tell the server, or we will configure our WSUS server to download the Windows updates for different operating systems in this folder. So here we'll tell him copy and then paste. So here it's DWSUS, so this is the location to save or to store the updates, and then next, then next, and then install. We can restart. It will need a restart, so tell him to restart the server when it is needed, and then install. So here we have a little bit of a lag in the performance, because here I have two virtual machines and they are taking a lot of processor power, and actually this lag is because of the hard disk. So there is a lot of activity on the hard disk. Okay, we can see here that I have 99% performance on the hard disk because I have two virtual machines and my host, so there is a lot of processing on the hard disk because there is an installation process running. So here I think I will pass this one because this is not related to our lab, so we will go there and pass it real quickly. So here we can see here that the lag has finished, so this means that my configuration is finished or my installation is finished. So here we can see that we need to configure the DHCP. This is the first thing. We need to first authorize the DHCP. What is authorization? Authorization, it means that you here the authorize. What means that here that you give the authority for this DHCP to give IP addresses to your workstations in the domain. So this is like a permission for this device or for this server to distribute IP addresses. This is very critical because some hackers or some people make a DHCP and try to put it in your network to give IP addresses to your workstation so he can hack them easily. But without this authorization, this DHCP will not work. So any hacker cannot put simply a DHCP server and make it work. You need this DHCP server should be authorized, and should be authorized by a very powerful Active Directory user in the domain, which is in this step it's the domain admin. Okay, so we need to make an authorization. Okay, so tell him commit. So we need to authorize it and then commit, and then this is done, and then we need to configure the WSUS. There is some launch post installation task, so we need to also configure the WSUS, and we will go to this step when it comes. So now after installing the DHCP, we need to add it to our custom console and then configure the different things. We need to configure the IP scope, we need to configure or tell the DHCP to distribute the DNS IP addresses and the WINS IP addresses and the default gateway IP addresses. So this all should be configured. And why we need to tell or to distribute the DNS IP address to the PCs, so it can be able to join the domain and to be able to communicate with each other. We have said before that this is DNS is very critical for communicating of the PCs between each other by name and not by IP address. So this is also a little bit or of a refreshment. What we will do here, we will go and here this is a couple of folders that I will share it later, and these folders will contain the department or the folders for the department. So if you open the department shares or the folders that we will share, we will see that I have different folders for different departments. We will share them and make users in each department to be able to access it. So here we add the DHCP console to the custom console, and we will add the file server resource manager, and we will add the update services or the WSUS console. So here when we add it, he tells us that he need to do some additional steps before enabling us to work with the WSUS or to add the console of the WSUS to our custom console. So anyway, we will tell him to add it or to run this complete WSUS installation. So we will not be able to add the console unless the installation of WSUS is finished. So here we will take some time. Anyway, now we can first of all, this is the DHCP. We need to go to the first domain controller and add the DHCP partner. So we need to have two DHCPs. Why we have, for example, what is the concept of the DHCP partner? You have two DHCPs that will be responsible for distributing IP addresses. So if one of them is down, the other can continue the work and distribute DHCP, or sorry, to distribute IP address. So this is a redundant plan or a plan B. So how this will work, the two DHCPs will distribute IP addresses, or we will divide the pool. For example, if you have 100 IP addresses, the two DHCPs will, everyone will distribute 50 IP address, so they will work in an option called load balance, so they will distribute 50% and 50%. Okay, anyway, so we will see how we can configure the DHCP. We will need to go to the first domain controller and add the DHCP also, which will act as a DHCP failover. So the second domain controller will be the DHCP master, and the first domain controller will be the failover. Here we will configure on our second domain controller, or our DHCP master will configure the scope. So here we will tell him what IP addresses will be distributed, how much IP addresses will be distributed. So here we will name this scope as Marvel, okay, DC, or Marvel RT, okay, scope, or I don't know what is the IT abbreviation, so it is Marvel robot scope, okay, or this is the scope. So we will begin configuring or distributing from 192.168.1.80 until 200. This depends upon how many PCs are in your network, so this depends. Okay, so for example, here are another best practice. Just a moment, we need to go here a little bit further. So another best practice, when you configure the scope, to make sure to have some of this scope or some of these ranges of IP addresses to be reserved for your servers and to be put statically. So for example, if you have from 80 to 200, if you have, for example, a scope available from 80 to 200, so for example, you can take 10 of these IP addresses and assign them or take them out of the distribution scope. So this will be only reserved for your servers, and they will be put statically. Okay, so you need to reserve some IP addresses out of this scope and put it statically, or put it for certain PCs that you need its IP address to be static. Or you can make a reservation, or you can make a DHCP reservation. This could be another step, but I prefer it to be statically, so you can take out of it certain IP range and make it or distribute it statically. And this is the subnet mask. And then next, and then here there is no exclusion, or there is no IP addresses, and this is the least time, and this is the scope. Here we have, for example, the router, so you need to tell him the router IP address or the default gateway, so the PCs can get to the internet. This is the DNS, okay, first and second, the wins first and second. So all of this will be distributed to the PCs. They will get the router IP, the DNS primary and secondary, the wins primary and secondary. Here we can see that we still have, or the WSUS configuration is still in work. So we have configured the DHCP master setting. We need to go to the first domain controller and configure another DHCP which will act as a failover DHCP or a DHCP partner. Okay, so we can go more further here. So here, sorry, go to tools. I don't think we will do this here anyway. So here, this is okay, anyway, we'll go further here again. So okay, so here again, so this is the first domain controller. We will open the server manager role, or server manager, and add a DHCP server role. This will be the failover DHCP. So we need to open the server manager on the first domain controller and add the DHCP role. This will be the second DHCP or the DHCP partner. Okay, and again I need to tell you all, there is an option called allow and deny filters. Okay, in the DHCP we will go to the DHCP master and we will enable these two options. These two options simply will allow you to give certain, or it will allow you to give IP addresses and deny IP addresses to certain computers using the MAC address. So for example, You can allow your DHCP to give IP addresses to certain computers, okay? So what if you need some other computers not to get an IP address at all? This also can be done through using the allow and deny filter. What is the allow and deny filter? Simply you go to the allow and deny, allow filter, and add an entry. Tell him that I need this PC with this network card MAC address to get an IP address, okay? Or the deny, tell him I need this PC with this network card MAC address not to get an IP address. This is very useful. For example, you have 100 PC in your domain, you put them all in the allow filter. So for example, if any foreign PC or any guest PC comes from outside and try to take an IP address from the DHCP, it will not be allowed, because you have certain number of PCs in the allow filter. If it's not in the allow filter, then it will be denied, okay? So we'll allow these two because it's very critical, and we will use them. I will show you all when we have some PCs to join the domain. We need to put them in the allow filter first, so they can take IP address from the DHCP. Anyway, we'll do this and then enable and enable, okay, and then we go to the first domain controller and then add the DHCP failover partner, or add the DHCP role first, and then make this DHCP as a failover partner. Anyway, here I'm just checking the Wins service. It is running. Here we will go and get to the manage, okay. We don't see any errors here in the server role. We tell him add roles and features, and then we will add the DHCP failover partner. So we will have a second DHCP, and then we will click on it. So we'll add the DHCP, so we will add the DHCP. This will be the DHCP failover, and then next, or add features, next, and then next, and then next, and then install. And then after that we need to configure the failover, and when it comes I will show you all how this is done. So here we can see still that the WSUS it's not configured yet. I think we can get a little bit quicker here. So here what we will do, we go there again, okay, again. So here again, sorry guys, so here after finishing the installation, but we will wait for a second, after finishing the installation of the DHCP role on the first domain controller, we will go to the second domain controller which have our DHCP master on it and configure the failover. So now we need to make sure that our DHCP is finished installation on the first domain controller. So here I forgot to add the file server, or the file server resource, okay. So from it here we will configure the file, or we will share folders, and we will make quotas, okay, on folders, and make file screening rules on it. I will discuss it when it comes, but this is the console. And then we can see, I will show you all, for example, the folders that we will share. So in my D partition I have a folder called department shares. This contains the folders that I will share for my departments, and we will have another folder created. We will make it with the name of users, okay. This is a folder that will contain my Active Directory home folders, okay, or my Active Directory users home folders. I will discuss this when it comes in the upcoming video. What is an Active Directory home folder, or what is Active Directory user home folder? So this will be for the Active Directory home folders, and this will be for the department shares, or this for the department folders that we will share and enable every department to access it. Okay, anyway, we will continue. So here, for example, we can see that we have, this is our all, so we have the accounting department, the engineering department, the FMB, the purchasing, all of these are department folders. We will share it and, for example, enable the accounting team to access the accounting folder, the engineering team to access the engineering folder, and we will limit every so for example, the accounting team will be able to access the accounting folder, but they need to be in the Active Directory group called accounting. So the Active Directory group called accounting will only be able to access the shared folder for the accounting. Okay, we will make this by permissions. If you need to know more, please refer to my previous videos concerning the file server and the sharing permissions and the limitation. So we can do this now, or we can do it later. So here we have an error concerning the WSUS. Okay, so we tell him to launch again this is all our pre steps or pre-staging before using the WSUS. So there is an error concerning the WSUS. It will be solved, but let's now go to the configuring of the DHCP failover. Anyway, the DHCP is not still, or it's still not configured on the first domain controller. So here I think we can go a little bit further, so we can see here. So again, go there. If you go to the first domain controller, it is completed, the DHCP is completed on the first domain controller. Tell him to complete the installation. We need also to authorize this DHCP server to distribute IP addresses. Then commit, then close, and then we need then to configure the DHCP failover. So we will go to the scope, okay, IP version 4, and then tell him configure failover. Here we'll have a couple of options. Here it's telling us that it will distribute, or it will copy this scope from the first DHCP and put it on the second DHCP. So it will copy the configuration of the scope from the master DHCP to the failover partner, or to the DHCP on the first domain controller. Best practice, as we have said before, not to have the DHCP configured with the domain controller. This should be on a separate server. Please refer to my previous videos concerning this. I've discussed it in the couple of videos before this one. Okay, so we will copy this configuration of this scope, okay, and then tell him next, and then he tells us who is the partner, or is the DHCP partner, or the second DHCP. So here we need to give him not the IP address, to give him the name of the server. So the name of the server will be DC Marvel 01. This will be the DHCP partner. So tell him add, and then we need to tell him to browse. Okay, so we cannot give the IP, we need to browse, okay, and type the name. Okay, browse and type the name, which is DC Marvel 01. Okay, and then okay, and then okay. So after tell him next, now here is a couple of options. Here it says to you that he will make a relationship between these two DHCPs, and it will give it a name, and the mode or the option that these two DHCP will work in it is called load balance. What we mean by load balance, that these two will distribute the IP address pool 50%, 50%. So for example, if you have 100 IP addresses to be distributed, the first, or the DHCP master, will distribute 50% of it, and the second DHCP will distribute 50% of it. In this example we have 100, so the first DHCP will distribute 50 IP addresses, and the second one will distribute 50 IP addresses. And to secure the connection between these two DHCP, there is a secret word, or the secret phrase. It will be given here to enable or to secure the connection between these two DHCPs. So we not we will not have any other foreign DHCP server to go between them. So this is to secure the connection between these two. So we will type a password. This will be shared between these two DHCP servers for securing the connection. Okay, so we will put here the password. Enable message authentication, so we'll put it here. This is very good. Okay, so here I think here is another. Someone tell me how the DHCP, for example, if one of the DHCPs are down, how the other one will know there is an interval or there is messages to be sent frequently between the two DHCP servers. So if these messages were not sent in a certain amount of time, the DHCP will know that there is his partner is down. So I think this is the maximum client lead time. I think it is 1 hour. Anyway, but there is a mechanism for the DHCP's partners to know if they are down or not, something by pinging them themselves, or by pinging themselves in intervals or certain intervals, or by communication with the message. Okay, anyway, so we will go there and next, finish, and then after finishing we can see that the configure failover is successful. If we go to the Marvel console and see the DHCP, we will see that the configuration is replicated. So here we will add the DHCP console. If we open it, we will see that our configuration on our master DHCP will be replicated and will appear on the DHCP partner or the secondary DHCP. So we will add the DHCP. Okay, and then if we open it, we will see the configuration. So here we can see it, and if you open the IP version 4, we can see that the DHCP is already configured and the configuration is replicated, okay, to this server. And we can see the pool, all we have done on the DHCP master is replicated here. So here if we can go here and see our WSUS, still there is problems with WSUS, but I think we will pass it real quickly here. So here I think we will go there, and so let's here go, and they will open the file server resource manager. What we will do now, as I said before, there is some folders that we will share to certain departments so they can put their important data on it. So we need to limit the amount of data the departments will put in their folders on the file server. This is called quota. So for example, I put a folder for the accounting and share it and tell the department of accounting to put their important data on this folder on the file server, but they can put data until or for a certain amount, for example 10 gigabyte of data, 20 gigabyte of data. This will call, or we call it quota. There is certain options in the quota, we will discuss it one by one. And then also I need to make something called file screening. What is file screening? Here I am telling, or I am putting a rule that you cannot put any type of data on this file, on this file folder, on this file, or this folder on the file server. For example, I do not want the users to put audio and video data on this folder. So this is called file screening. I am blocking certain type of files not to be put on the folder on the file server. I will show you all this when it comes, but it's called file screening. Anyway, we will open the file server resource manager, and then we will do something called quota. Okay, so here we will tell him quota, right click, and okay, we have put this already in the custom console. We tell him create quota, and then we need to tell him to create quota. We have here two options, something called create quota on path and auto apply template, and create quotas on existing and new folders. What is the difference between these two? These are two type of quotas. The first one, for example, if I have a folder and this folder have subfolders and I put a quota on the main folder, so we have a main folder and subfolders. Okay, I put the quota on the main folder. For example, it's 10 gigabyte. This 10 gigabyte will be shared with the subfolders. For example, I have 10 subfolders, and I have put a quota on the main folder, okay, which is 10 gigabyte. This 10 gigabyte will be shared with the subfolders in this folder. So for example, I have 10 folders, they will share the 10 gigabyte of quota, okay. So for example, if one of these subfolders have 10 gigabyte data on it, the other 9 will not be able to put anything, okay, or the other 9 folders will not be able to put anything. This is the first one. As for the second one, no, if I put quota or apply this type of quota on the main folder, every subfolder will take the same amount. For example, if I choose the second one and put on the main folder 10 gigabyte, every subfolder will take 10 gigabytes. It will not share the 10 gigabyte. Everyone will take 10 gigabytes. So this is the main difference between the two, okay. And also another thing, if I use the second option, any new subfolder will be created under the main folder will take 10 gigabyte automatically, okay. So this is also a very good one. This we will use it on the Active Directory home folders, and we will use this one for the department folders, okay. So we can now continue. So here we'll go to the folder. Here I am choose first. There is this is a pre quotas, okay. So we have here 100 limits. We have a lot of limits. You can configure a custom one, or you can choose from the predefined quotas, okay. So here I will give the department shares or to share 5 gigabyte. So all of them will share 5 gigabyte of storage between the different departments, okay. So for example, if the accounting team put 5 gigabyte of data, the other departments will not be able to put any other data, okay. Anyway, we will choose it 5 gigabyte of limit, and then we will go to browse and we'll go to the D, and then we will make it the department shares, okay, and then we will create the quota, okay. And you'll have a couple of things here. There is a warning. For example, there is a quota, so-called quota warning. If you reach a certain limit, for example, if you reached for example here, if you reached 85% of the storage or the quota was consumed, he will send an email for the administrator and he will put it in the event log. So you can and put it in the event log, and after that he will block you completely from putting further data, okay. So you have 3 options here to tell him what to do. For example, to send a warning, and then to send an email and put it send a warning and sending a warning and put it in the event log, and then at the end you will block the user from adding more data, okay. So here we will complete. So we'll use the choose the other one, and then we put it on the users folder, okay, users folder, and then okay, and then we will give it 2 gigabyte maybe. And here, so here we can see something. Here we can see something called quota type hard. What do we mean by hard? That the user, and when he reaches the 5 gigabyte or the 5 gigabyte storage, no further data can be put again. But there is something called soft. Soft means that he can reach the 5 giga and then continue putting data for a certain amount of time. For example, he can, when he reach 5 gigabyte and then begin putting certain data, for example, you will give him a time for example 1 or 2 days. He will be warned for 1 or 2 days that he should stop putting data, but you give him 1 or 2 days to put data, so he can bypass the 5 giga, so he can put 6 or 7 or 8. You give him a limitation for 2 days, and after that he will be stopped completely. It is best to practice to be type quota hard, okay, because if you give it soft, this means that the users can still put data and exceed their quota limitation. This is not recommended, or it's not best practice, because you have a hard disk limitation on your file server. So it is best to have the quota type hard, okay. So anyway, we will put it, and then we'll make something called file screening. Here we will block certain type of files to be put on the folders on the file server. So we will block audio and video, so I don't need the users to put audio and video files, movies or music or something. so we will limit it, or we limit the users to put certain files. Here you can block executable files, image files, email files, executable files, but here we will only block the audio and video. So I'll tell him file and then department shares. We will block audio and video on this folders and all of the subfolders, and then we will block also the on the users folders, which will be our Active Directory home folders. We will discuss what is Active Directory home folders later. So we will go there, and here we will add to the users, and we'll block audio and video, and then create. So now we have our quota created, our folders quota created. The next or the upcoming videos we will share the folders and put the different permissions on it. Here we have some things concerning the configuration. Anyway, we restarted the server to rectify this error. So I need to restart the server. Okay, and here one of the things, I think, just give me here give you some hint here. You need to make sure when you configure the WSUS and there is a problem accessing the WSUS. Okay, for example, if you open the WSUS console, or you cannot be able to access the WSUS, or there is problems with the WSUS, you need to check on certain services in the Windows. What is these services? You need to open the something called administrative tools and then access the services. Okay, so we will open here this, and we will open the services here. And if you have any problems with WSUS, you need first to check the services console from the administrative tools, and you need to check something called Windows internal database. Here I need to tell you all something, guys. The WSUS, you can, it's not only to distribute different Windows updates to different PCs in your domain, but it will make reports also concerning these updates. Okay, how much updates are installed, how much updates are missing, how much computers are missing updates. All of these data are stored on a database. So this database, it is something called Windows internal database. So for this database attached to the WSUS to save its data on it, for this database to work, there is a service in the Windows. You should check and see if it's running or not. This service, it is called Windows internal database. So you need to make sure that the Windows internal database is working, these two. Okay, so you need to make sure that these two or specifically this one to be running. If there is a problem with WSUS, you cannot able to communicate with the WSUS, you cannot be able to access the WSUS console, you need to make sure that this service is up and running. Okay, so this is something to note. Anyway, we will restart the server. Okay, so here I have restarted the server and access it again, and then we will repeat the process. We will again try to configure the WSUS and see the different options. So we have restarted the server to rectify the error that had appeared, and then if everything is working okay, he will ask you some questions before begin working with WSUS. Some things we will see now, but anyway, I will show you all these options. Here I will add, again I forgot to add the DHCP and so on. So anyway, here we'll see that the Windows service is not running. Anyway, we will add the console of the Windows updates. So here we will have again the same error appearing. So here we are checking to see if the Windows internal database is working. I think we can go there here again. So you will see that the Windows internal database is working. So we will begin configuring again the WSUS. Okay, this is the one that we have error concerning it. We will begin configuring it, and at the end we will see that it will succeed, and we will see certain options. Okay, so here I'm just checking if my Windows services is up and running. Anyway, so here we will just pause the video until everything is working. So this is before working with the WSUS. Okay, so here we will pause the video. I think he's making a restart. Anyway, this is not the issue here, so we'll go there, and here we can see that it is working already. Okay, it's working, so we tell him close. Post installation is completed. Now we can begin configuring the WSUS. So after that I will show you all what is the steps here. Or here it will tell us, okay, first of all, before beginning, this is the initial configuration. Here it's the license agreement, and then we tell him next, accept the license agreement, and then going to the next one. Here we're just making sure that I have access to the internet, okay, because the WSUS will try to communicate with the Microsoft website to install the updates, or to download the updates. So here I'm trying to see if I have internet connection. Anyway, I have internet connection, so this is only a step to test my internet connectivity. So here we will begin, or we will work with this one. Anyway, so we will just put it, or just make it. He will accept the license agreement, and then he will tell him he needs to synchronize or to get the updates from the Microsoft website. So this is the first option. You can get your updates from another WSUS server. So if you have 2 or 3 WSUS servers, and this WSUS server doesn't have internet access, and the other WSUS server have internet access, so you can tell him to get his updates from the WSUS server that has internet access. Anyway, we will tell him to directly go to the internet and communicate with the Microsoft website and get the updates. Okay, and then he will tell you if you have a proxy. So for example, if you have, just a moment, if you have a proxy, or just a moment, we can get a little bit further here. So if you have a proxy, what do we mean by proxy? So if you have a proxy, for example, if you have a firewall, or you have a web filter. So for example, the proxy, it's not it's something like caching, or it's server proxy server. Its function is to cache the websites, so you can easily access the websites. Anyway, if you have a proxy, we will tell him if you have a proxy or not, but here we don't have a proxy. And then he is asking about here, first of all, he will try to communicate with Microsoft website. So this is an initial connecting. Okay, so let's see if he will succeed. To start connecting, he will test the speed of the internet, and to test if he can communicate with the Microsoft website. So anyway, I think we will here I think we will pause the video until the initial communication between the WSUS and the Microsoft website is done. Anyway, so it is done already, and then next he will begin asking what language you need to download the updates with. So you need to install the English updates, or the English Windows updates, and for which products. For here, for example, we have in our domain, we have Windows 10 and we have Windows Server 2019 for the servers. So we have different operating systems. We will choose which updates we need the WSUS to download from the Microsoft website. We have Office 2019. we not only download the Windows updates, we can download the Microsoft updates, like Office updates. For example, you have the Windows Defender. So you have all of these setting, or all of these operating systems. So we will choose what type of operating system updates and Microsoft products updates we need to download. So here we will choose Windows 10 and Windows Server 2019 and Office 2019 updates. So here, for example, he is choosing Windows 10 updates for us. So here I am choosing the Windows 10 updates, okay, and the Windows Server updates 2019 and the Office 2019 updates. Okay, Windows 10. Okay, Windows Server 2016, now Windows Server 19. So here we have choose the language of the updates and the type of products we need to download updates for, and here is some kind of updates. So the updates are classified according to certain criteria. There is critical updates. This update should be installed immediately when they are issued from Microsoft, and this is something called security updates. This is a little less in importance, but you should also install it, okay, but you can install it after a certain amount of time, but the critical should be installed immediately, and this is less important. And we have the definition updates. This is the least important one, and this could be for the Microsoft Windows Defender, for example. And we have the drivers update. So if you have updates for your drivers on your workstations, this also can be downloaded. And we have tools, or we have something here. We will choose only the security updates, the critical updates, and the definition updates. This will be enough for us, because these are the most important type of updates we need to install. You have the upgrade. For example, if you have upgrade of certain Microsoft 10 Windows 10 operating system, anyway we will choose only the critical and the definition updates and the security updates. You can install, or you can choose tools, for example, or updates, okay, or drivers. Anyway, then next, and then here is something. Here he will ask you when you need the WSUS to communicate with the Microsoft website to get the updates. Okay, you can tell him to do it now, and then you can after that synchronize it automatically. So you can tell the WSUS website to communicate with Microsoft website and download the updates when the users are not working in your domain. So you can put it or do it at midnight, for example, where there is no users or computers working in your domain. You can put it automatically at, for example, midnight. So this is best practice also, to make it automatically at a time that the users are not working, so you will not consume the bandwidth of the internet. So this is one of the benefits of using a WSUS. You can synchronize or automate and set the time to download the updates, okay, and this can be done when your users are not working, or at midnight, or when there is no activity in your domain or your network. So we'll do this, and then we tell him to next. We will not begin synchronizing now, so we will tell him to synchronize automatically and assign a certain time, and then finish. So now we have our WSUS initial configuration finished. We will do a couple of other configuration. We will configure some things. Anyway, I need to configure, or I need to tell you some concept here. We have said that the WSUS will be responsible for downloading the updates for all of the operating systems in your domain and distribute it to your PCs in your domain. How the workstations will know that they need to communicate with the WSUS to get their updates, instead of going up or going to the internet and getting the updates from the Microsoft website directly. This will be done using a group policy. But let's consider that they have known the WSUS IP address and name, and they have communicated with the WSUS to get their IP address. What is the first step the WSUS will do? The WSUS will register the computer in his database and put it in a certain location, okay? So for example, I have a workstation, a server, and so all of them communicated with WSUS. First of all, he will put them all in one place, okay? So he will register them and put them in his console, in his database, in one place. We need to differentiate, or we will make different folders or different places. So the WSUS, for example, will register the workstations in one place, and he will configure the servers in one place. We will know that later we can use this type of configuration or differentiation for our benefit. So let's see what I mean practically. So here we will tell him finish, and I'll show you what I mean by this. Anyway, we'll tell him finish, and then okay. So here we will go, and if we open the update services here, anyway, we will check and see that the when the service is up and running. Here we'll open the update services. Here I will show you all how this is done. Here we can see that the WSUS have the updates classified with two things. Here we'll have, if we open the updates menu, here we can see that he classified them to a couple of categories, and here he's classifying the computers for a couple of categories. I will show you all this by mean here. So here, for example, here we have all updates. All updates will be here, and there is the critical updates, the security updates, the WSUS update. So there is an update for the WSUS role. Okay, so all of these are classifications, and updates will be put there. Okay, so this is a good way to differentiate the critical updates from the security updates from the WSUS updates. Okay, and then we can see here, for example, that this is an overview how much computers have errors in installing the updates, how much computers needing the updates, if there is an updates is expired or not applicable, and how much updates that you will approve and decline. For example, here if you download, or the WSUS download a lot of updates, they will not be installed automatically. You need to approve them to be installed, and I will show you all that after that you can approve certain updates to be installed to certain computers. So here you can control the updates that will be installed and to what computers they will be installed. So the process of installation of the updates is not done automatically. He will download the updates for you automatically, WSUS, but he needs the admin approval to approve these updates and push them to the clients. He can push them to all of the clients or certain clients, for example, and this is the sync. So here you can tell him to communicate with the Microsoft website now. Anyway, so we'll go and see another thing here. So we'll not sync now, or we'll not communicate with the Microsoft website now. Here we'll go to the computers. Here we can see that we have something called unassigned. So this is when the WSUS, there is a workstation communicating with the WSUS, it will register and put this PC or a computer in the unassigned computers container. Okay, so for example, if a workstation and the server communicated with WSUS, he will put them both in this container. So this is not good. I need to differentiate, or to put the computers or the workstations in one container and the servers in one containers. Why this? Because after that I can tell him, for example, to install the critical updates on the containers that contains the servers first, and after that I can tell him to install the security updates to the containers that contain the workstations only. So here I can control what kind of updates to be installed to what kind of computers. Okay, so here we will make a computer group and we will name it terminals or servers. Here I put all of the servers in this container. Okay, and then we will have another computer group. Okay, I will put the workstations or the terminals in it. So here, by using these groups, I can tell him to install certain updates to certain computer group. So here we'll put terminals and robots and test. Also a best practice, when you install or when you download certain updates, you need first to test these updates. So you can make a computer group called test and put some computers in this group, and this will be your test environment for testing the updates. We all know that there is some errors concerning Microsoft updates, some updates having some problems. So before widely installing these updates, you can test them first on a couple of computers or a couple of computers that will put in a certain group, and we will name it test. For example, I have a lot of departments, and every department will have certain PCs, so I can choose from each department a PC for testing and put all of them in this group and test my updates on them. If they are successful, I can spreadly or I can widely spread installing these updates on the terminals or servers, so and so. Anyway, so we'll do this. We'll add a computer. Terminals and robots, they are the same. Okay, so this is done. So we can install certain updates to certain computer groups. Okay, so I think the video is finished maybe, but let me see if I have anything to do later. So hope this video is informative for you all. In the upcoming video we'll begin working with the user or Active Directory user home folders and sharing some folders for the departments, and we will see the process of mapping these share folders by using mapping group policy. I hope this video was informative for you all, and would like to thank you all for viewing. Thank you so much.